Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for January 19, 2025. Today, we're talking with Hrant Mikaelian, a researcher and analyst based in Yerevan. Hello, Hrant. Welcome to the show.
Ողջույն Hrant.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Hrant, we are recording this on Monday, January 20th, as Trump's inauguration unfolds right as we speak. This marks one of the most anticipated U.S. transitions of power in recent memory. From the risk of nuclear confrontation with Russia to a potential U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran and broader shifts in the global order, Trump's presidency is poised to play a pivotal role. What are your general observations on the foreign policy that Trump may pursue?
Well, first of all, we have lots of uncertainties. And while there was a transition period since November to January, it was very tense internationally. And we had big fear of new war in the Caucasus, and there were also fears that a war against Iran can begin. Then situation on Russia-Ukraine front was very tense. So as of now, it might be easing for some time at least, because the election has passed, and usually it happens in America when the power is switching. So my first expectation is that at least for some time, there will be a decrease in tensions internationally. That's first expectation. Second is that Trump will change policy. Usually they say there is no major differences between Democrats and Republicans, and it was in most cases true even during the first term of Trump, and then switching to Biden, not much has changed. I think now a lot of things will change. That's second, which is important. Third, I think Trump has lots of obvious agendas, but lots of hidden agenda as well. And I think the talks about Greenland and some other stuff is intended to hide the real intentions, in my view. So I think there is a lot of things he wants to do, and not everything which he wants to speak about.
It's interesting. I would like to learn more about what you think his hidden agendas are. But Trump is already taking credit for getting Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire in Gaza. To me, this is curious because, he has stacked his cabinet with all neocons. Many of them call themselves, or are not shamed to call themselves Christian Zionists. And many speculate that an attack against Iran and full support for Israeli policies and Israeli dominance in the Middle East is going to be one of Trump's main foreign policy foundations. So how big of a role do you think Trump had in getting Netanyahu to sign the Gaza ceasefire, which goes into effect, I think, yesterday or today? And also, how durable do you think this ceasefire will be? And anything else you can tell us about Trump's Middle Eastern policies?
I think Trump's influence was significant, and I think his approach towards Israel was one of the hidden agendas, because many believed, especially in Israel, that Trump will be very pronouncedly pro-Zionist, and I think he won't be. And I think Israeli topic has now become very toxic in the Middle East. So if US wants to stay there, it will be difficult to handle the conflict the way it was handling it last year and a half. So I think he will try to ease some contradictions. And let's remember that abandoning nuclear negotiations with Iran, the previous time in 2017, it happened after Netanyahu's request. I mean, Trump has abandoned the nuclear negotiations with Iran because of Netanyahu's approach. And now I don't think they will be listened to him that much, because he is too confrontational. That's first thing which is important here. And the second is that not only Trump is important, of course, as a key to Gaza negotiation, because it was bipartisan consensus, which is not very frequent last days, but since it happened this time, they have concluded this negotiation. And by the way, this negotiation has been prepared since May. So it's not that Trump has prepared this negotiation. This negotiation was prepared under mediation of US, Egypt, and Qatar. And Israel has accepted it, but probably Israel won't have accepted it if they knew Trump can support them to abandon this. And by the way, I think that Israel will try to abandon this in any case. At least Israeli speakers whom I have heard lately, pro-Netanyahu speakers, let's say, they were speaking how they can avoid implementing this agreement. But anyway, if Trump will be assertive on that, it will be very hard for Israel because Israel is very highly dependent on the United States.
Hrant, let's now dive into the whirlwind of diplomatic activity that happened around the globe, especially in the sphere of signing partnership agreements. So I would call this a play in three acts. Act one was on January 17th, Russia and Iran sealed a much anticipated strategic partnership, a move that analysts say could have far reaching implications for both countries and the region. Act two, meanwhile, was in Ukraine, where Keir Starmer surprised everyone by an unannounced visit to Kiev, where he signed a 100-year, you heard that right, a 100-year partnership agreement with Zelensky, committing the UK to stand by Ukraine for a century. And Act 3 was in our region, in Armenia, which stepped into the fray with its own strategic partnership agreement, this time with the United States. But this move seems to be less like a strategic win to me and more like a high-stakes gamble, risking tensions with Iran and Russia. So let's talk about all of these, but let's start with Russia and Iran. So again, on January 17, Putin and Pezeshkian signed the Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, marking an unprecedented deepening of Russo-Iranian relations. It is a 20-year treaty automatically extending every 5 years and has the potential to shift geopolitical alliances. It may affect all conflicts such as Ukraine, Syria, Gaza, Palestine, and Lebanon, according to various analysts. But I wanted to ask you, what is your overall impression of this treaty? Have you had a chance to read it yet?
I have read parts of it, so I cannot make final judgments. But my impression is that I would not overestimate this agreement. This agreement does not beat any strict obligations on any of the sides. As of now, they have only obligations not to get involved in a war against each other, but not to help each other in military terms if one is involved. But there are lots of dimensions of military cooperation and political cooperation and economic cooperation, because there is a second track of Iran, Russia, and Iran-Eurasian Union negotiation on free trade agreements. So I think this should be viewed in the overall context, but at least as of now, sides did not take any strict responsibilities. But the reason is, in my view, is that this agreement is agreement of the equals. It's not agreement between a patron and vassal. And neither side considers itself as a vassal or patron. So this is very important, but this also marks the deepening of the relations. On the other hand, if we compare it to the Russia-North Korea agreement, we can see that that agreement is much more comprehensive and deep. So I think we should not overestimate this agreement, but at the same time, this is as a milestone towards deepening that relations. And what is important is that the agreement was signed right before Trump entered the US office, and there is a good reason for that. Both sides are going to have negotiations with Trump, so they want to be more prepared, let's say, and to meet him in a better condition, in a stronger position.
Hrant, Section 3 of the document, which is a key element of the treaty, forbids either party from supporting potential aggressors targeting the other, as you mentioned already. How does this align with Russia's existing alliance treaty that it has with Azerbaijan? Because we know that Azerbaijan is viewed by the West and Israel as a key resource in any future attack against Iran. And we know that Azerbaijan has a strong military alliance with Israel. So, how do you think both sides, Iran and Russia, view this point of the agreement in light of Azerbaijan's role in the region?
Theoretically, it's a very important question. because in case of major instability in Iran, Azerbaijan might be viewed as a source for instability in Iranian north, where many ethnic Azerbaijanis live. So that's an important question. Another thing is to consider here is that Russia and Azerbaijan have signed a treaty right before the so-called special military operation or Russian intervention in Ukraine. So I think, first of all, both sides were aware. So Azerbaijan knew that Russia is going to attack Ukraine and signed it. But Russian interest there was to neutralize Azerbaijani possible aggression against Artsakh because they wanted to keep their military presence there. As we know, this policy has failed. So Azerbaijan did not keep its promises. So in reality, I don't think any of the sides, I mean Russia and Azerbaijan, consider this document as a viable document or as something which is in reality working. So I think they will reconsider their relations after the Ukrainian war, when Russia was, pushed to the corner, but by the West, and did not consider many issues in relations with countries like Azerbaijan. So I think Iranian document has much higher priority, while Azerbaijani document is purely declarative.
Hrant, on January 16, just a few days ago, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited Kiev to sign a landmark 100-year partnership agreement with Zelensky. This extensive pact commits the UK and Ukraine to a long-term cooperation in defense, particularly maritime security in the Black, Baltic, and Azov seas, and also it contains technological projects including drone development. The document talks about strengthening consensus on Ukraine's NATO membership. This is going to be a very important point, I think. And Starmer emphasized the UK's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, stating, "We are both with you, not just for today and tomorrow, not for this year and the next, but for the next 100 years." Hovik, not to make light of this, it's almost
I'm
at the
getting
level of the
goosebumps.
100-year pact that you and I have made strategically for this podcast, right?
No, we need to upgrade that. We need to upgrade our podcast pact to 125 years
I
just to up
see.
this
Yes,
one.
that's going to be very important. Okay, not to
Groong
make
will be there to report. Groong will be there to call out the UK and
all the drone
Ukrainian
strikes and
relations.
everything. That's right. Okay, it's just to get back on track. Hrant, again, is the timing of this agreement also related to Trump's inauguration as a significant milestone? And could it signal that instead of the US going forward, it's now going to be the UK that will be the flag bearer for the West's support for Ukraine?
Let me try to bring the context here. First, US and UK were always competing in Ukraine for power, and currently we can easily say that current Ukraine government is pro UK more than pro US, and it has been like that at least for last several years, especially during Zelensky term.
Even though all of the money is coming from the US, and by all I mean all of the significant amounts, not like 100%.
Well, in reality, Americans tend to underestimate the European involvement. That's first. But second, which is in this case more important, is that UK is able to control Ukrainian elites, which does not require as much money, but requires more proficient political work, in which UK proved to be capable of. So, there have been leaks that Zelensky has a house in London. He visits UK frequently. He visits MI6 office. He meets senior officials of UK, and not only him. The top military commander Zaluzhny is now ambassador of Ukraine in UK. And by the way, in his approval rate, Zaluzhny is ahead of Zelensky. So it's possible that if the election is held tomorrow, Zaluzhny might become a new president. And he is completely merged with UK elite during his last statements and last meetings and so on. So that's second, which is important. And then there is some internal clash within Ukrainian elite between pro-US and pro-UK parties, let's say. which is not always visible, but there are people who are, let's say, more pro-American, who represent or who have worked in American organizations, and those who are pro-UK, who represent the current ruling party and not. So that's first layer. Second, it's obvious that it's connected to Trump. Keir Starmer has been criticized for less aid to Ukraine lately, and he decided to, until it's late, he decided to visit Kiev. And the reason is that now in the West, there are many voices. It's not only Trump, by far not only Trump, but there are many voices in the West that demand stopping the Ukrainian war. And there are some voices who are against it. And UK is clearly on the side of hardliners or those who want to continue this war. And US will be on the side of, stop it right now. So UK is trying to reaffirm Kiev to set the military agenda for foreseeable future. And now, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday, Zelensky has put some sanctions against his own citizens, against any of those who are criticizing the continuing war effort and who are demanding negotiation as soon as possible. It was right yesterday after the agreement with UK. So he got clear message that UK will support him.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem here is that Keir Starmer government and overall current political system in UK is not very stable. So I would not rely for 100 years on the political system, which is in systemic turmoil. And after winning the election half year ago with a very big difference and taking the whole parliament, now Keir Starmer's approval rate is as low as possible. So I think it's not predestined that he will continue being UK prime minister for a long time. So I would not rely on that. Another thing is that US will have lots of tools to affect the Ukrainian side. It's not only just funding. There are many ways to affect. So, and I think Trump is dedicated to resolving Ukrainian conflict. And I think if Zelensky will try to keep the hard line, continue war effort, I think that will be a big difficulty for him.
Hrant, except for the 100-year time frame that is questionable here, are there other components of this agreement that you would like to talk about, you would like to highlight?
Of course, we can look at the numbers, at the obligation UK took to finance Ukraine, and some other obligations which Ukraine took to fight for, to fight for UK interests worldwide. Yeah, but I think what is important here is that both governments are unstable, and many people, many experts in Ukraine are very skeptical about it. I've heard lots of discussions about it, and vast majority are very skeptical about it. And 3.6 billions, and as long as it takes means during the military conflict. And if the war ends tomorrow, they will stop the financing, and 3.6 billions will not cover Kiev expenses. It will be enough for 1 month to finance Ukraine. Ukraine requires about $5 billion monthly to balance the budget. It can cut down to 4 billions or to 3.6, but again, it's enough just for 1 month. So UK cannot resolve all Ukrainian issues, and Ukraine is not also able to resolve all UK issues. So I think this agreement is just a PR stunt, but at the same time, UK tries to reassure Zelensky that he should continue with the hard line. We all remember the Artsakh statement. He was one of the negotiators in the Russia-Ukrainian negotiations in Istanbul in April 2022, when he said that Boris Johnson, UK Prime Minister, came to Kiev and told them not to sign an agreement with Russia. And this is the reason why the war is continuing for 2.5 more years as of now, or already 3 years as of now. And by the way, David Artsakh can be considered a representative of pro-American party in Ukrainian establishment. That is why he was talking about UK role, not US role. But anyway, I think as of now, since the approaches are merging, Ukraine will not be able to continue as long as it takes. They will have to stop within let's say 9 months or so. So I think in 2025, the Ukrainian war will be ended. And they are betting against the reality, against the steam, let's say.
Well, shifting gears, 2 days before Keir Starmer's visit to Kiev on January 14, Ararat Mirzoyan was in Washington, D.C., signing a strategic partnership with the U.S. and Anthony Blinken. There are 5 main sections to this document. The link to the agreement is going to be in the show notes at podcast.groong.org/episode number. I don't want to go through a lot of it, but basically the 5 main sections had the principles of partnership, an economic component, a defense and security component, a democracy component, which to me was somewhat pablomy, and then there was a cultural section as well. Hrant, yeah, I'm sure you've seen and you've analyzed this document. What aspects of it do you consider strategic? And also, why wasn't it signed by the two heads of the states instead of their foreign ministers? Usually, a strategic document is signed by the top guy in the country.
Well, it could easily be that Biden was not capable or was not ready to, publicly participate in such event. I don't know. Regarding the signing of the document, I think it is important that at this stage, negotiations were not. The document was not completely ready, and they had to hurry up before Trump gets into office. I think this is obvious because current Armenian administration has worked with Democrats whole time, so this is also important. Another important direction, I don't see, to be frank, any of strategic things there except to the nuclear energy issue, because nuclear energy has very high strategic importance, and it's a very long-term issue. Because if Armenia agrees to build a nuclear power plant under, French technology or Russian technology or American technology, that will determine the level of cooperation between the countries in energy for the next, let's say, 50 years or so. Because
So it seems like Armenia is committing to US technology. Is that correct? Or what do you think?
as of now, we are heading there. And in reality, with this agreement, let me say this. In contrary to Russia-Iran agreement, where the sides are, let's say, equal, or at least close to equal, US-Armenia agreement and UK-Ukraine agreement are not agreements between the equal sides. And in agreements which are signed between unequal sides, usually the smaller sides, the weaker sides, takes more obligations than the stronger side. So I think US will gain more in this after this agreement. There were discussions in Armenia that after American flag is raised, then Azerbaijan will never ever try to attack Armenia or so, or something like that. But I don't think so. I don't think that just flag as of today, be it US, Russia, or anyone else, is capable to stop an aggressor. So I think that there is a very weak security component in this document. Of course, there are some talks that there will be a consultant group arriving to Armenian-Iranian border, but again, it's Armenian-Iranian border. Maybe they will arrive to Armenian-Azerbaijani border as well, but it's not troop.
Why not the Armenian-Turkish border?
I think that will be discussed as well.
Mm-hmm.
As of now, there are Russians disposed, but at some point, I think they will try to remove Russians and to bring American military base there. But I'm not sure that Americans will agree. It's not only Armenia should agree on that, but also United States, because it's a tense region, and new obligations for United States is a new problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as of now, this document is more like declarative, and it's not bad. It's good that relations are developing, and the existing documents are updated and deepened, and so on. But what might be a problem is an overestimated expectation, which is created in Armenia by the government, because some people start believing that after signing this document, Armenia will be completely safe, and this is not what is happening in reality. So this is, I think, a problem.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question again, which is, how is the Armenian government spinning this in the media? from what I've seen, it's being presented in epic terms, as if it's a huge shift and a huge achievement, whereas you're saying basically it's a modest improvement on existing bases. And I know that Armenian relations with the United States have been incrementally improving every year since 1990s. So, anything specific that you want to mention about how the government is presenting this, other than what you have said already?
Well, what I can say here is that they are not only presenting it in as something which is very important, which again I agree with your estimate, which is just moderate improvement. And by the way, we can say that Georgia has such agreement with United States since
2009.
2009, and Ukraine has since November 2021. So I think this type of agreements America can sign with countries with which they are going to develop relations further. But at the same time, we're seeing that there is some trouble in Georgian Western relations, and I think the Biden administration wanted to shift the focus of United States Caucasus policy from Georgia to Armenia, and that's why they have signed this agreement right before Trump entered the office. He would not sign, most probably, but I don't think he will abandon it either. So,
Hrant, what would be the reason for the shift in focus from Georgia to Armenia?
as of now, Georgian government is trying to be more independent, more to pursue more sovereign policy, which implies they don't ask the United States for what they should do next. And moreover, when they are pushed, when there is some expectations that Georgia will, let's say, put sanction on Russia, for example, get involved in conflict with Russia, or will abandon its economic relations with China, which is now a big deal there. I think Georgia has now shown that they are not going to go this way. And that is why United States government, especially under Biden administration, was very frustrated. And they were supporting opposition in Georgia for last several months. So now they are understanding that Georgian government is going to stay there, and they need to have a foothold in South Caucasus, and most probably they are viewing Armenia as a possible foothold.
But without Georgia being completely compliant to US demands or EU demands, is there adequate access to Armenia to basically, execute this strategic partnership between Armenia and the United States?
And in fact, I was going to say, how serious is the U.S. perceiving this document versus how Armenia is doing it? Because we talked about it being an incremental improvement over the relations, but there's frequently this talk that the U.S. is using these agreements only to cause problems for Russia. So that's the gain for the U.S. That's the benefit for the U.S. What is Armenia getting out of this in terms of security or any improvements?
Yeah, you're right. I don't think that this is a long-term game, as Asbed said. I think again in Washington they think that the Georgian government will not stay there forever. It might go after the protest series. So I think they believe Georgian government will not be very stable. So the question of access to Armenia is important in terms of major security challenge or military challenge. But when we are talking about just political cooperation or just declarative level, then Yerevan is more than capable of. And that's most of what Yerevan is capable of, political statements and so on. So I think as of now, what is expected from Yerevan is to publicly support, this political agenda of cooperation and political agenda of American political presence in the South Caucasus, including the Iranian border, which is important for United States. And yes, right, I don't think that Armenia has a lot to gain from this partnership, because basically US has very little to give to Armenia, and I have not seen any specific negotiation on what US can deliver to Armenia in terms of security, economy, or something else.
Yeah, Last week, the issue of Artsakh was again in the news. Not like it's not always in our hearts and minds, but with the Artsakh leaders being on sham trials in Baku, it was ever more present. And Artsakhis were in Yerevan protesting. And the major, I think, desire by Artsakhis is to have a way to return to their homes in Artsakh, in Nagorno-Karabakh. And coming back to this agreement, I was looking at the preamble of the document. And basically, if you analyze it word for word, it is a copy paste of the Georgian agreement, the US-Georgia Strategic Partnership Agreement from 2009 and the US-Armenia Strategic Partnership from 2024 are exactly almost copies of each other, with one notable difference, which is that the Georgian version mentions, and I'm quoting, secure and voluntary return of all internally displaced persons and refugees. The Armenian version is missing this phrase completely. So I wanted to ask, I mean, why remove this specific phrase, especially if you're basically copying and pasting the entire document? It's very obvious that this phrase was removed. Why is this de-emphasis? Why is the issue of refugees and return of the rights of their return de-emphasized in the US-Armenia version of the strategic document?
That's a very good question. In reality, if we look at the policy of international organizations and American NGOs which are working in Armenia, the activities by them in the direction of Artsakh issue is to integrate Artsakhi refugees into Armenian society, the way they are not, they are losing their Artsakhi identity. So in reality, the imperative here is to close the Artsakh question completely. And this was American imperative for a long time. And Pashinyan's policy towards Artsakh, especially recognition of Azerbaijani territorial integrity, was a price to integrate towards the West. There is no doubt about it, because when in late 2021 and in 2022, especially autumn 2022, Pashinyan switched negotiation table from Russia to Brussels and Washington. He was talking about, in Prague in October 2022, he was talking about a recognition of Azerbaijani territorial integrity, and later it was commented by his previous ally, political ally, Levon Zurabian, who represents Armenian National Congress, who said that in Pashinyan party, they decided that Russia is losing in Ukraine, so they can completely bet on the West. And the West's approach is that they need to have a good road towards the Central Asia. And the East-West corridor, Armenia lies on it. Azerbaijan and Turkey require it, and they're trying to frame so-called Zangezur corridor into this overall context, the East-West corridor. They are selling it as part of the East-West corridor, which is bypassing Russia and Iran, to the West. Not only to the West, they are negotiating with Russia as well regarding the corridor. They are trying to sell to Russia it as a place where Russians can stand. So in reality, Russian approach was by 2022 that they need to leave Artsakhi conflict as it is for the future generation before it will be possible to resolve the conflict. While European and American approach was to resolve it right now in favor of Azerbaijan. So Pashinyan decided the second, because that was a price of integration into the Western structures. At least he was told so. And almost immediately after Armenians have fled Artsakh in late September, early October 2023, Pashinyan has went to Granada to negotiations with Aliyev under European mediation. And he said, now nothing is stopping us from signing a peace treaty. So it was Artsakhi Armenians who did not let him, if we understand him directly. Aliyev did not come there. After that, the European Parliament has adopted two resolutions in which they cited Armenia's effort, and they supported Armenia's effort, and they welcomed Armenia's integration into the European Union. And Right after, it was late 2023, right after, Pashinyan has declared. So first was a declaration, the resolution by European Parliament, and then Pashinyan has stated that he wants to join European Union. So he stated it afterwards, not before. So we can assume there was an ongoing negotiation process before the fall of Artsakh, and the fall of Artsakh was part of that. And now that is why they don't want to raise this question, because it does not let them to finalize the project of East-West corridor, under which, we can remember many energetic projects or some other projects, let's say roads, railroads, and so on, which are basically connecting Turkey and Azerbaijan. There was Nabucco project, you might remember, and they all were bypassing Armenia. So now they are trying to put it through Armenia. And they have viewed in the West that Artsakh is an obstacle. At least Turkey and Azerbaijan have communicated to them that Artsakh is an obstacle, or basically Armenia is an obstacle. So American approach is that Artsakh issue is not existing anymore. That's approach of United States, at least of Biden administration, which many in Armenia viewed as pro-Armenian. Let's see what Trump administration will do. I don't think it will be very much different, but at least we have heard by many officials before the election, many officials of current Trump administration, which will have to be approved by the Congress, that their approach towards Artsakh issue was different. We can remember
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard, or we can remember Robert Kennedy, or even Trump's own statement.
So essentially, in the same week, the Armenian government signed a provocative strategic agreement with the United States and also greenlighted a bill for a referendum on joining the European Union. We talked about this last week. We reported on this already. But what's new this week is that I should also mention that Russian officials and both spokespeople for the Kremlin have repeatedly said that European Union and EAEU, for instance, are not mutually compatible, right? But so what happened last week was Pashinyan. I mean, I have to give it to the guy. He had the gall to call Vladimir Putin and explain to him about Armenia's decisions on why Armenia decided to make these moves. So, Hanat, a bit humorously, do you think that Putin basically took that call with some curiosity, maybe a bit of patience, or just a really deep sigh? What can you tell us about this conversation and the news that Pashinyan basically called Putin and said, "Yeah, sorry, we had to sign that." I mean, I don't know if he said sorry, but he said, "Yeah, Vladimir Vladimirovich, we had to sign that strategic partnership. It has no relation to Russian-Armenian relations." Do you think something like that was said, or what do you think? How do you think that call went?
Well, first of all, I think this time, after Pashinyan has declared that he wants to hold the EU accession referendum, there were some discussions in Russia that this is a problematic move. They view this as a problem. But after signing an agreement with United States, a strategic partnership agreement, there was virtually nothing in Russian media afterwards. So, in my view, this means that, be afraid when they are silent, not when they talk. And I think Pashinyan has understood that as well, or maybe he was told by Russians that eventually this partnership will be viewed as a very problematic and as a kind of red line, or I don't know what. And I think he needed to communicate with the Russian leader that nothing is changing right now. And by the way, the EU, yeah, okay, EU is not compatible, but it's not that Armenia is becoming part of EU in any foreseeable future. So it's not only about Armenia, but it's also about EU, and primarily about EU, because there is a long list of countries which are waiting to enter EU, and they are not going to enter EU for the foreseeable future, especially Georgia, not to talk about Armenia. So it's just a political declaration. Maybe he
Yeah.
told him that as of now, this is pure diplomatic process. And Putin said, okay, I've heard you. I think Putin is now very focused on Ukraine. And in Putin's view, he needs to resolve the issue of Ukraine, and afterwards he will deal with the post-Soviet space, which is currently problematic for Russia. It's not only about Armenia. Russia is losing post-Soviet space completely. I think if we look at Pashinyan as a separate important actor, we will overestimate him. There is a geopolitical battle between Russia and the West in the post-Soviet space, and Russia is losing there. So since Russia understood that they are losing politically, they tried to switch the table and to start military action against Ukraine, and they are trying to resolve all their set of issues on the post-Soviet space through that specific case. And if they will be able to negotiate with United States on that, I think they will try to put the whole package of relations with post-Soviet countries in one slot of negotiation with United States. So it's not only about Ukraine. And moreover, I think that after Ukraine, Russia will try to deal with Armenia first, because the amount of problems with Armenia is biggest as of now in the post-Soviet space. Not biggest per se, but biggest compared to the pre-war status quo, let's say, compared to 2021. The change since 2021 with Armenia is biggest. So they will try to deal with Armenia diplomatically, and I don't know how, but of course I'm afraid that Russia will completely switch sides and will support Azerbaijan, which is not excluded as well.
Yeah, I'm curious to see exactly how this is going to work out, because the US-Armenia agreement seems to be at odds from what I can see with the Iran-Russia agreement. That one has a clause to specifically try to exclude third countries, third parties from the Transcaucasian space. Meanwhile,
That's
Armenia is
Article 12 in the agreement, basically.
Yeah, and Armenia is explicitly inviting, let's say, the US, the EU to come to this space. So I don't know how this is going to be resolved once the Ukraine issue is, receding in history.
Well, it will be very, very much depending on how a Russian-Ukrainian war will end. That's first. And second, how tensions in Iran will end, because as of now, there are many ifs in Iran, especially after the so-called axis of resistance has suffered a lot in 2024 after collapse of Syria and Hezbollah. So if Iran will continue pushing its policies, then I think they will recover in some time, and Armenia will be in trouble if Pashinyan will continue his policy.
All right, let's wrap up our topics and find out from each of you if there are any thoughts that you would like to share with our audience. Hovik?
Yeah, regarding the presidential inauguration, I just have to mention that the most interesting meme was Jeffrey Zuckerberg staring down what was euphemistically termed as the Panama Canal. Look it up yourself to see what he was looking at. And
so you don't think it was Fetterman showing up in shorts?
No, I think this one was better.
Okay.
But at least it was more aesthetic, let's just put it this way. But on a more serious note, I think that last week was pretty tough on us because we saw images of, emaciated Artsakh leadership paraded on on Azerbaijani TV. Almost every one of them looked like they lost half their body weight, with the exception of Arayik Harutyunyan. And be ready. I think it's important not to share these images, but I think it's really important to realize that the honor of every single Armenian is now on trial. And in all seriousness, I think that every single day we have to remember what these people are going through, and we have to remember that our honor basically is held hostage in Baku. And until Armenians figure out how to free that hostage, free our honor from Baku, we will always live in dishonor.
Hrant, any thoughts?
Well, I think Hovik said it so well that I cannot add anything but to agree completely. I think it's a shameful situation we're going through, and unfortunately, there were some propagandists of current governments that were making statements against Artsakh leadership, which is under trial, because they are trying to defend Pashinyan's policies. So I think The big problem is that there is very little attention in Armenia, in fact, to this trial as of now, at least not sufficient. And I think this shows the very poor conditions of Armenian political landscape as of now. I think Artsakh issue should be on the top list of Armenian political debate now and always, because it's a primary question, not only due to its importance, but also current condition of Artsakh issue shows what is the real condition of Armenian statehood as of now. So I think at least from this standpoint, it's very important to track this story and to do everything possible to change the status quo.
And one last comment, if I can, please. Sorry, but I do have to mention that Ruben Vardanyan specifically made a statement saying that he has made no confessions. He has not signed any statements other than reporting his name and his identity to his his captors. And I think that it should be safely assumed that none of the evidence in quotes, presented by Baku, whatever you see on Twitter, will be real. It will be either extracted under torture or is completely fabricated. So please do not spread any statements alluding them to be, statements from Artsakh officials in Baku.
Good point. All right. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you, Hrant, for joining us.
Thank you, Hrant.
Thank you guys for having me.
That was our Week in Review show recorded on January 20th, 2025. We've been talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. He's also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute. For more information on the participants in this episode, check out our show notes at podcast.groong.org/episode number. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.